I'm going to preface this by saying that I love SAO. However, I'm well aware of its flaws and will likely be calling out some of them at various points in this video and any others that I make. I think the fact that I like SAO, and thus have watched it several times and read or listened to the light novels several times, gives me some level of perspective on the series. I have run into far too many people criticizing aspects of SAO that do make sense if you actually delve deeper into the story, lore, and world, or try to give any level of benefit of the doubt to the author. I will be using some references to the light novels, but I will try to keep things mostly focused on what is available in the anime or can be inferred from it. I'll try to call out if I'm using supporting info from the LNs, and I'll also try to give simpler versions of my arguments to be logically obtained without source material. Lastly, I'm going to try to keep this video focused on a somewhat narrow topic that touches on some larger topics that deserve videos of their own, so forgive me if I cut off some tangents before I go too far into a different area. The simplest way to put this is the nature of floors in SAO negates most of the advantages of level grinding as a party and negates most of the disadvantages of leveling solo. The issue is highlighted by SAO being a death game, mostly because of how dangerous boss fights are. To lay some groundwork, many games with party play divide experience between party members. Guild Wars is an easy game to see this in because the XP numbers are small and easy to visualize. Enemies of equal level to the player give 100 XP when killed, but in a party of 8, the maximum size, you only get 12.5. Similarly, in the Generation 1 Pokemon games, the XP all shared XP equally amongst all of your party, and from Gen 2 to Gen 5, the XP share allowed you to divide it between Pokemon that were in battle and Pokemon that were holding an XP share. Not all XP sharing is purely divisive, of course. In Generation 6 and later Pokemon games, the XP share gives half XP to the whole party, acting as an XP multiplier as long as you have more than 2 party members. For another example, League of Legends does this with minion XP. 2 champions with an XP range of a minion, each getting about 2/3 of the XP a single champion would have, meaning in total they gain 4/3 of the solo XP. This is normally compensated for by group play being much more efficient than solo play. A solo player generally can't safely fight monsters that are as high level as a group can, and group play is also generally faster per kill, though I'll go more into that later. A game like SAO where solo play is slightly more favored, the primary advantage of group play is the ability to fight tougher monsters. Being able to fight higher level monsters and kill them somewhat faster means that a group can get larger rewards more often compared to a solo player, which makes up for having to split those rewards between the players. In most games, and likely in SAO under normal circumstances, players in groups would fight monsters of their level or possibly higher. Guild Wars, for instance, has a player level cap of 20, and you'll face enemies of level 20 for most of the game. By the end of the campaign, you'll be regularly facing enemies level 24 and even higher, and beating the game unlocks hard mode where you can face enemies of level 26 or even higher than that. Solo players would likely have to face monsters of lower levels, though how far down can depend upon the game. However, SAO has something else limiting what level of monsters players can face: the system of floors and floor bosses. Because the players have to fight a floor boss, which carries a high risk of real death, to advance to the next area, on-level monsters generally aren't available. The highest level of monster available is capped by the player the floors are on, rather than their ability to fight such monsters. This eliminates the higher XP that a group depends upon to make up the difference on a solo player. They're stuck clearing the same monsters as solo players, and shared XP hurts them more than the faster fights help them. I'm going to run some numbers from Guild Wars as an example. The point of this is to be sort of a Fermi estimation. The numbers of SAO would no doubt be different, but the relationship should be similar. 6 players seems to be a pretty normal party size in SAO. So let's look at a level 15 party of 6 versus a level 15 solo player. At this level, it takes 10,400 XP to reach level 16. Let's assume that the party of 6 can fight level 15 monsters, that the solo player has to fight level 12s. Guild Wars XP scaling means the solo player gets 48 XP per kill, while the party shares 100 and thus gets 16.66 per person. The solo player gets more XP per kill and gets all of the drops to himself, but the group can kill enemies faster. They only need to be about 3 times faster in order to get more XP per hour than the solo player, which is reasonable given the party size. But now let's apply the logic of SAO to the scenario. The players are always higher leveled in the current frontline area because they haven't beat the boss and unlocked the next floor yet. In our Guild Wars example, that would put both groups against level 12 monsters. The solo player still gets 48 XP per kill, but now the group players are splitting that 48 XP down to 8 XP per player. That means they have to be fully 6 times as fast as the solo player to keep up an XP. Even if the solo player is a higher level of 17, and thus only getting 16 XP per kill and needing 11,400 to level up, the group still has to be almost twice as fast as he is in order to reach the same rate of progress. I'd like to do a second example, but I can't find another game that I'm familiar with that gives me good XP by level numbers to work with and has party XP sharing mechanics. These are not universal mechanics. I guess one example will have to do. In any case, this should demonstrate a scenario in which the effective level cap on the monsters players can fight seriously hurts parties' abilities to grind. Parties depend on higher quantity and quality of fights to make up for sharing XP between party members, and this removes the quality advantage. This can leave solo players with a pretty large advantage depending on how their respective clear speeds stack up, so this is as good a time as any to look at the quantity part of that equation. This section will be necessarily more subjective than the previous one, since there are no hard numbers for how fast players kill things in SAO, and it's not something that can be easily approximated by using another game. What we see of party fighting in SAO indicates that group clearing is mostly a matter of safety and ease rather than speed. The safety factor should be obvious, so I won't be going into it. For ease, the anime mentions that switching makes things easier, but only the LN explains how. The monster AI adapts to player patterns over the course of the fight, so switching with another player using a different weapon forces a sort of reset that confuses the AI temporarily. Kirito mentions that he can do this on his own, but that requires deliberate setup, while in a party with Asuna, it's as easy as tagging in and out. However, that doesn't appear to speed up the fights much, if at all. His solo fight against a monster on the 74th floor dungeon, and another alongside Asuna later in the same dungeon and the same episode, are in fact almost the same length in the anime, although neither are shown in full. What this means is that we should estimate the party clear speed advantage to be at the low end of the spectrum. This matches well with the type of scenario where solo play gives better XP rates. With boss fights capping monster levels, and only a marginal advantage in clear speed, XP sharing amongst the party becomes the primary difference between solo and party play, and that heavily favors solo players. A party of 5 or 6 is likely earning around a quarter of the XP a solo player is per hour, gaining 1/6 of the XP but at a slightly faster rate. Even accounting for higher XP requirements at higher levels, this can mostly account for Kirito's level advantage at the end of SAO, but there are a few more things I would like to cover. Kirito's initial lead is a slightly different story, but basically comes down to beta experience. By getting out ASAP on day 1 and fighting higher level monsters, he was ahead of most players. According to an unadapted side story, he knew of a quest that let him get a strong, for the first floor, sword to carry him even further ahead. On the flip side, most players started out extremely cautiously. I'm pretty sure this is LN only as well, but one player described how he first decided to leave the starting town. They'd fight only the weakest and thus lowest XP monsters in groups of 10 or more until they'd build up enough of a level advantage to move on. This isn't exactly difficult to deduce from the anime, of course. Obviously, most players start out extremely cautiously, and Kirito does give some explanation as to why he wants to get the hell out of Dodge on the first night. The advantage is likely more than just the one day in many cases as well. With Asuna and Schmidt, both clearing group members, discuss how they spent some time camping out in the starting city before finally setting out on the path that led them to the top. This is incidentally where we learn about how new players would work in huge groups to safely level when first starting out, by the way. Asuna may have spent a week or more before moving out, and Schmidt may have waited for months. Catching up is relatively easier since they can use the party advantage to grind faster until they reach the frontline level, but that still gives Kirito a significant head start over a good portion of the clearing group. Lastly, there is one more advantage for solo play that is independent of SAO and exists even in normal games: time availability. Playing with a party requires organization, and the length of your grind is based on the weakest link in your team. Being trapped in SAO may mean that no one will have family emergencies or have to go to work or school. Grinding is their job. But you still have to go with your team, and even the most grind-tolerant team is going to struggle to match someone who can literally go grind whenever and wherever they want. Kirito is called out on a few occasions for how much hours he puts in, and just as a bonus, getting solo loot from kills lets him pour money out on consumables to stay in the field longer. Even in a situation where everyone is playing full-time, I think it's reasonable to believe that someone who is alone would be free to grind more than even the most dedicated party can match. So, wrapping things up, I think that it is reasonable for Kirito, as a solo player, to have a significant level lead over the rest of the clearing group in SAO. Solo play and group play each have their advantages, but the nature of SAO heavily pares back the advantages of group play when it comes to efficiency. I haven't really touched on the safety factor, which is the reason that Kirito is essentially the only person soloing. Playing solo is absolutely risky, and it's mentioned that solo players had the highest death rate early in the game. Kirito's survival certainly benefited from some level of plot armor, but that's totally normal for any fictional work. Newsflash, main characters tend not to die. Kirito not dying with a risky playstyle is middle-of-the-road plot armor at worst. I'll leave defending SAO narratively to another video though, and wrap this one up here. See you around!